So far we have Bob, Carl, Jorge, Martin, myself, and Ed on the call. Was anyone else from the Rwanda team or activities going to join, Carl? Do you know?
Not that I know of specifically.
Okay. I wasn't aware of anybody else either. I just thought I'd check.
I don't know if Derek is coming or not. He just got in last night from the Philippines, so he might be pretty jet lagged.
Okay, cool. So I think we had envisioned this call to be focused on some of the activities going on in Rwanda, specifically related to connecting the facility registry to IRIS, as well as there's a bunch of different email traffic going on about reports needing a master facility list and a number of other things. And Bob and Carl, maybe you guys could give us a bit of background on some of the challenges that you're facing or some of the activities that you're trying to complete. And I think we're particularly interested to hear about how the facility registry can contribute to that or best play into some of the things that you're trying to do.
Bob, you're the most recent one there.
Scott, I don't even know if I want to answer all that.
Oh, why not? Why not? What's going on?
Hang on. Let me just turn my mic down a little bit. Check. Yeah, I mean, I've been involved in a few things in Rwanda, I guess, since I visited there in July. I guess there was a few items on sort of Randy's wish list, what needed to be done. He's got data in a system called TrackNet, which you're probably aware of. We wanted to import that data into DHIS. There's data in the IRIS system, human resource data, some human resource indicators that he wanted imported into the data warehouse. There's 3 DHIS instances, all of which have evolved a little bit independently of one another, and all their facilities were disagreeing with one another. And then there's the resource mapper facility registry itself, right, which also has yet another list of facilities. So yeah, the importing of data from TrackNet is a little bit horrible because the only way the data is available is as a CSV, but CSV is okay. We could manipulate that and read it in. They're basic data elements which are coded according to, amongst other things, a facility identifier, FOSA ID. The same with the IRIS data, where we get like the number of doctors, the number of nurses, the number of what have you, also coded against a facility identifier. Now, technically, both of those problems were easy enough to solve. I mean, one can reformat the data, get it into a form that can be read in, but the data itself is not meaningful or reliable yet because the facility identifiers are not matching. So we still don't have a situation in Rwanda where we've got all systems using the same set of facility identifiers. And in fact, I think we only quite recently, perhaps last week, have got what might be called a reasonably authoritative list now of what all those facilities are. So the challenges I've been having is now trying to first of all, get all those facilities in agreement with one another for the various DHIS instances, which have now solved. Getting that list into IRIS and into Resource Mapper, and doing it in a way that's sort of repeatable and long-term sustainable. And then, yeah, I don't know what the process has been for IRIS to update its list of facilities, how it's got its current list of codes, what the plan is for updating it longer term. There are some difficulties I've found working with Resource Mapper in that there's like two exercises going on. I mean, one exercise, I think, Scott, you've been working with Randy on building up new layers and what have you. Yeah, they're creating a new set of metadata, if you like, for facilities. It's kind of difficult to export data from DHIS currently into that, because the coded lists that you have, even for simple things like I've been trying to get the facility type agreeing with one another on both sides. We have a list of facility types in DHIS. There's a list of facility types in Resource Mapper. I can't find a simple way of manipulating the layers metadata in Resource Mapper. I know there's quite a bit of possibility with the native API, but that would involve messing with the layers that you guys have already set up. Yeah, so it's all very complicated at the moment. I'm not sure what the best I've managed to do currently is at least get the DHIS facilities sorted out. So they are now, I think, as correct as any other list could be. But how to now propagate that list into Resource Mapper, and how other systems, like, I have no idea how TrackNet will do it. IRIS, I'm sure, will work something out with Carl. Sorry, Martin.
Yeah, I was actually replying to your email about that topic, about updating the facility type list. What I was about to suggest is to add a couple of native API endpoints to Resource Map, which is something that we could do more or less quickly. It would be something like this. So instead, I know that consuming the whole layers of the collection is a bit problematic. I mean, it's a huge request and has a big payload. So what we could do is to add a get for the metadata of a given field. For example, in this case, 1196 would be the resource map ID for the facility type field, where you would get just the metadata for that field. And if you put that same JSON with the code changed, you would be able to update. For example, I found in the list you shared, there was one change that it was quite clear, was that, I'm checking on this, sorry. So in the current facility registry in resource map, there's a Hôpital Provincial, which is in French, I think, with code HP. From the list you share, I saw that now it's actually the code is PH, and the name is
yeah, I think the translation from French to English is something that's happened over the last 2-3 years, as Rwanda has moved more away from the French.
Okay. So my guess was that if we can provide you these two endpoints, you can directly operate on the metadata of a single field. I think that's all you need, because since there's an ID for each each category in this case. You could say, okay, this type which used to be HP, now it's PH. Please update that, and that's it. I don't know. Do you think that something like this could support you, the use case you have? And
Yeah, I think something to post the list of codes would definitely be useful. I mean, I could use that almost immediately to get the types sorted.
Can I jump back a little bit and just, before we get into the web APIs, and it seems like very likely that we're going to be implementing CSD, and kind of this direct system-to-system interaction might be a way to mitigate some of these difficulties that we have. I know at least from the Iris perspective, we don't want to be producing any facility list. We don't really want to be contributing that information. We'd much rather be consumers of that information. And I mean, we've got lots of different systems that are kind of hanging out, and I'm worried about getting into too closely tied one system to another. So I would urge us to maybe look to see if CSD could play the middleman for a lot of this work. My only hesitation, my only qualification with that Iris would be a consumer of the facility data is that I don't know if we're just talking about service facilities with Rwanda, or are we also talking about administrative facilities? Would, for example, the Ministry of Health headquarters be one of the facilities in the master facility list?
I think not currently. I think currently in the facility registry you just have effectively geographic points.
Okay.
Yeah, Carl, I think it just comes down to
we-
how they define a facility for Rwanda. And if, I mean, there is an instance
Yeah.
where, okay, a Ministry of Health office needs to be designated as a facility, it's certainly feasible, but I don't think that's currently how they're defining, a location where services are provided.
Okay, because from the Iris perspective, we would certainly need to have that in the facility list, because we have people employed at headquarters. We have lots of people there. They're part of the health workforce. They might not be providing services, but...
Yep, makes sense. No, and it's common to even have like more than one office in the same building, kind of like registered as two different facilities.
I do think that Carl has also raised the issue of whether or not we're going to have a consistent way of connecting anything to anything, or whether or not we're going to have to program hand code point-to-point connections every time we want to share content. Like, regardless of whether any one issue is soluble or not by writing some code, whether or not we're going to have a sharing platform that we're going to use. Am I reading more into your comment, Carl, than you intended?
No, I think that's exactly it. Expressed a little bit more succinctly.
Well, that's the hope of the facility registry, right? I mean, if I'm reading your question correctly, it's not a matter of whether you need to connect to different endpoints. It's a matter of like how the Ministry of Health decides to do the data governance and the processes to have a real master facility list and a real facility registry. Or if you have tools that, even if capable of doing that, are used not as such. That's kind of like I think what's going on here.
Yeah.
And like what we're seeing is the process of gravitating towards that. And the demand is there. I mean, there is systems that need to have the trustworthy list of facilities, and then systems that need to have that subset of that, and need to contribute data into that, and so on. And what you're seeing here is evolution over time about what are those systems and what are the direction of the arrows. But there is no. I think there's no question that nobody would want to have to code anything custom for any particular data exchange down the line.
Right, and I think maybe it seems like the facility lists are going through a data cleanup and analysis process, and I just want to, it'd be nice to divorce that from the actual interoperability issues that we have, and to me it's not clear as to what you guys are talking about supporting for the data cleanup and versus the longer term central authority for the facility list.
Yeah, and I agree that's a good distinction. I mean, you might have the most interoperable system with lots of crap data, and you might have the best data, like floating in an email and a CSV, and that's I think part of the journey, marrying those two, and getting the benefits of both good data and good interoperability in the same time at the same place. And so far, I don't know, both of you want to comment on what you use to do the facility cleanup, but what I've seen people use over there is mostly Access and Excel and a lot of elbow grease and lots of sorting and.
Yeah, well, it's a bit like that. Postgres rather than Access, but
Yeah.
I mean, I think the important thing has been, first of all, to establish the baseline, and really, there's the Rwanda Ministry of Health people who have to kind of drive that, and have been to a certain extent. And after that, it's a question of establishing, as you say, Ed, the direction of the arrows. I think that's really quite critical. In terms of, because it's easy enough to establish a kind of single point in time truth, and you can even establish it across 3 or 4 or 5 systems. But what the dynamics are then of going forwards, if somebody makes a change to the way facilities are categorized, for example, or if a change is made to whatever, where that change is made, how it gets propagated, and the like. I think something like CSD can help in the sense of providing a kind of facade over the dirtiness, but it's those the kind of organizational issues need to be resolved. And some of it relates to the type of data. I mean, I think, and the way the same type of data in 2 systems means something quite differently. Population is a sort of interesting, simple example, I guess. I mean, in Resource Mapper, you have a population field for a facility. In DHIS, you have a kind of semi-permanent data element for population, which gets updated every year. So on one system it's an attribute, whereas on the other system, I guess it's a time series data element. How you translate between those two is a question of orchestrating the information flows.
Yeah, or actually, I think, Bob, in that case, it's more a matter of defining the data dictionary that they want to keep in each place, right? So if the cases where they're keeping all the demographics and the statistics and the population densities and so on, let them keep that in DHIS as a master source, and then that gets brought into the facility registry, if at all needed. I think in a way, like the whole issue about the direction of the arrows is more a conversation topic than an actual problem, in a way. I think that if we just said, look, where are people entering the data, and in which way does it flow, and what sort of updates should affect which others, very quickly you'll see that there's some queuing that needs to happen to the data dictionary in Rwanda, or some fields will have to go away. They'll be very clear what sort of partial updates would come from different other systems. It would shed an initial light on the permission systems that people are expecting, and on top of that, it would also shed some light into any kind of governance or approval processes that Rwanda might not still have, that they might want to have in place. Like if TrackNet, kind of contributes a chunk of data, who gets to say that gets accepted and sent to all the facilities automatically, or does it require a human to say, yay, go? And I think it's more of a matter of working through it. I'm afraid that we might be stalling just by saying there is this issue instead of trying to say, yeah, of course there is, and let's try to resolve it.
Yeah, I think, Ed, just in terms of the way we've been working over the past year, I think one of the problems, I don't think that the sort of stakeholders have really got together and discussed it in one forum. I mean, I haven't sat down with both Randy and Scott and Carl, for example. So I have these discussions with Randy. Randy has these discussions with Scott, and I think sometimes we
yes, I agree. There's a lot of running around.
We kind of wander off in different directions. So when I saw, I think in the email last week, Scott was saying, we needed to have a chat with Randy. I was saying, well, yeah, please include me on that as well, because I think we actually haven't succeeded in having that yet.
Yeah, no, it would be great. We've been asking for it. That'd be, I think, important to have.
And as you say, I think a lot of the things that we are looking at as problems may not actually be as problematic if all the right people are together trying to reach consensus over them.
I agree.
I'm just trying
to hear that.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get this stuff out of my hair right now. So anything that moves it forward is good.
I agree. Well, I mean, forward in a good direction, and I think we have the good elements to move it in the right direction. But I agree with you, Bob. It's been a little bit about hey, let's stop running around this tree and actually start climbing it in a way. And if a conversation with Randy can actually help move that forward, that'd be great. And then I think it's good to take some help Randy through the process of going through all the decisions you might need to go through with working assumptions, saying, look, this might not be the ultimate thing, but try whatever strategy for 6 months until proven wrong, right? It's the best that this working group can come up with, and because we're always going to be able to invent more problems. So which ones are the real ones is always going to be a surprise. So, and I think that there's obviously lots of willingness on the technical team here to make sure that that it is all well supported by the right interfaces and the standards, and then to make sure that any sort of unique learnings that come out of the implementation of it make it through the FRED and the CSE and other efforts that we have around coming up with these standard interfaces for things. And, I think by working it together, we'll see that it's not black magic. I mean, there's no black magic sort of interface that we've done so far. They've all been really little tiny endpoint thingies that have popped up. And if anything, we haven't yet, made the effort to bring them back into FRED and things like that, because we actually cannot point to a solution and say, yeah, this collection of endpoints actually helps solve the problem. So far, it's, I don't think we can point to something and say this is the thing to kind of help replicate as a success. But as soon as we have something more coherent going in Rwanda, I'm sure that we can look at saying, look, here's the 6 things that different sorts of facility registries need to expose in terms of metadata and updates and reads and things like that, and it should be straightforward. Kind of consensus process. Don't you agree?
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I think we've many of us, most of us, I think, have noted over the past year or so, one of the big to-dos within FRED, I guess, is to figure out how we deal with this issue of metadata exchange, and that's certainly that's the tripping point currently in Rwanda. That we have a lot of data in one system with a completely different set of metadata to another system, and that makes it really difficult to harmonize the two. And yeah, I think we just need to sit down with the stakeholders for whom that metadata matters, and find ways of getting it right. That's, I mean, that's a particularly difficult problem, I guess, we have between DHIS and Resource Mapper, because we are both maintaining quite a large amount of metadata on all the facilities. I mean, IRIS, I guess, to a certain extent as well. I mean, IRIS is not like OpenMRS. IRIS, you're also maintaining the full list of facilities, and
where they are in the administrative hierarchy or the geographic hierarchy as well.
Yeah, and I mean, what I've found anyway, as I was sharing with you last week, is when we try to export data, we find that the list of facilities that are there in IRIS, which may have been populated some month or 2 or 3 or 6 back, are not the same as what we currently have in DHIS, and it wouldn't be possible that they would be, because the situation has been very unstable in terms of the Rwanda Ministry of Health management of these things themselves. I think a bit of the I mean, Ed or Scott, when was the your resource map and new facility registry? Where did those facilities come from, and how long ago?
I think initially the list was probably imported from...
You're talking about the Rwanda dataset?
Yeah.
The original source of that was a Randy's Access database, where he was maintaining a list, where he was doing some of the data entry, and he was exporting from DHIS, he told me. But that was a long time ago. The last import, Scott might know where it comes from. I don't know.
Sorry, I was getting myself off mute there. I think it was a combination of some data from DHS and that access file, was my understanding. And I think part of the challenge that we have is there's multiple lists, and they're trying to reconcile across those lists to have a master national list that's documented in the registry, and that's what I think will really benefit the network of systems here. So.
Can we?
Yeah. Oh, and there's another source of data for that, which was at one point in time they were doing data entry from the paper forms, and but I do not know what subset of facilities, what subset of the forms were data entered, and we would probably need to ask Randy that.
Can I ask a simple question? Is there any plan that between DHIS, TrackNet, Resource Map that all but one of those systems is going to stop adding new facilities? I mean, from our perspective, from IRIS, that's where we want to get to. We want to shut down the creation of new facilities in IRIS directly.
I don't think we can ever get there. Oh, I see what you mean. Not shutting down creation of new facilities, but shutting down creation of them within IRIS.
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, so who is going to be the one that's responsible for, in the long-term view of creating of new facilities? What's going to be the authority?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just really unclear
in terms of logical. Yeah. In logical terms, Carl, usually the responsibility of a registry service is to have such authority to say until something is not in the registry, it doesn't exist, right? And to exist, it needs to be submitted to the registry. Now, and I think that's important from a data management perspective in an SOA environment. Now, there's a different question altogether, which are the systems that we want to have people use to submit data to this facility registry to help create a facility. And it could be the user interface of Resource Map. It could be the user interface of TrackNet as the ministry decides.
Okay, but where is that data? I'm just really unclear as to where that long-term, who's going to be that authority. I'm just, from hard to be difficult, but
it's going to be in the facility registry for sure, and then replicated in a bunch of other services that use that data.
So by the facility registry, you mean resource map as the system, or?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm talking about the architectural role. Yeah, implementation-wise, today, the facility registry is a resource map. And, if they wanted to implement the facility registry in Excel, it would be a very painful facility registry, but it would still conform all their, they could still, pretend to do all the technical things from it. It would be a bit painful.
I mean, it would need to be a FRED compliant facility registry or something else, right? So that other systems.
Yeah, it would have to be a FRED and CSD compliant and whatever else we come up with compliant thing that supplies all the functional and non-functional requirements that we've identified for facility registries and help the data move around. And it may well turn out to be that the facility registry is just like a headless system that's acting as a data exchange, which is the role of a registry, and that would be awesome. And mostly people might interact with its data through other systems, like seeing it through the OHIE and so on. What we have seen, however, is there's a bunch of how do you say it, the requirements and use cases about facility data management and kind of curation and cleanup and from janitorial to maintenance services that require like a specific experience that other tools are unlikely to take on. And if I were them, I would run away from it as much as possible, which is some of the stuff that we've been including over time in resource maps. Not because the service itself wasn't able to handle the data, but because users wanted to be able to mop around the data in ways that those systems that have other purposes probably should try to avoid doing. I would.
Okay.
So I don't know if that question.
So resource map, at least in the short term for the long term, is going to be the authority for the list of facilities. Let's put aside the metadata issue. Let's put aside all of these other attributes or whatnot on the facilities. If we just want a facility list, then we need to, from the IRIS perspective, we should be linking with resource map, whether it's through the FRED API or some other facade,
Carl, can I put another slant on that? Because I agree. I think what you're asking there is really a critical question, and I think one of the biggest sources of confusion for most of us, certainly me. But when I was there in July, what they decided, and it's something that was brought up earlier, I think, by Richard Kukuba, that what we would do was to populate the resource mapper registry from DHIS. So DHIS you could think of as a sort of input end, right? And then within resource mapper, there's some user interface components and some additional attributes which may be particular to what they wanted to maintain in that registry. But it would be the sort of public interface. So there's the outward-facing view of the list of facilities. That was my kind of last understanding. That's what I've been trying to implement.
Okay. So from the IRIS perspective, we don't need to even know that DHIS exists.
No, I mean from the IRIS perspective, if you get the data from the registry, it should be the same data that DHIS also has, assuming that DHIS has populated it.
Okay.
I think it might be a question of time and maturity as well, because I think over time, once the list is correct and up to date and in the resource mapper, they can take the decision at some point to simply start maintaining it from there. But they have to take a decision to maintain it from somewhere. And I think that decision's been floating a little bit over the last 2 years. I mean, Scott's even talked about getting the data from DHIS, but it's not that simple. We've got 4 DHISs, and if you ask any one of the 4, you'll get a different set of answers.
Right, and
Because-
then DHIS was not set up with all the paper form questions that they had around facilities for the census. So there's yet another bigger data set in terms of the number of fields that's floating around. So yeah, it's complex to see where they want to enter the data from. Oh shit, I think Hello?
Yeah. No, I mean, I just know Randy's really interested in getting Iris reading from the facilities and not having to have this issue, and I want to find the shortest path there. And I don't know. I mean, we have CSD that's likely going to be serving as a provider registry, and I don't know if just having something like CSD, which I think addresses a lot of these issues related to multiple sources of facility information, is what Iris should be reading from, or should be reading from resource map. I mean, we've got some. Randy has, he's got his deadlines and whatnot, and it's been. If there isn't going to be a resolution soon, we're going to have to do something. We have to make some decisions, and not sit idle.
Yeah, well, I mean, what I've said that I can do, and I was hoping to have done last week, but it proved complicated. What I said I can do, I can populate a resource mapper instance with the facility information as it exists in the HMIS, DHIS instance. What I can't easily do is populate the resource mapper instance because of the metadata issue. Somebody got a radio on.
Oh no, there's somebody in my. Sorry, I'll mute. Somebody's talking.
Sorry. And I don't know, maybe someone from the resource mapper side can take the incomplete information that's in my instance of resource mapper and easily import that into the main proper instance, if you like. But it's not something that's easy for me to do. But I don't even think I've got permissions to update the metadata in the main facility registry. From your perspective, Carl, you want to have facility. If you're talking about having data sets that you want to import into DHIS, then you want to have the codes as they exist within DHIS. You couldn't get those directly from DHIS, but if we have a situation where Resource Mapper has exactly the same information in it, then it's cleaner that you get it from there.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be the ID. That's, it could be, we can have multiple identifiers, and we can just have one that's tagged as the DHIS identifier, and we can export data using that if that's easier.
No, it's the FOSA ID. The FOSA ID is the kind of the authoritative identifier in Rwanda.
But that's only for clinical facilities, not the administrative facilities. Who assigns the FOSA?
That's what Randy's been doing on his spreadsheet, if I understand correctly. But for I think now he may be doing it directly in DHIS. The code field for administrative facilities, they seem to have some system because they are putting codes in for them.
Okay.
They're obviously not the same as FOSA IDs, but I could find you an example. I need to look it up.
Okay.
Where am I? Okay, I'll log in now and have a look.
Is there an advantage for something that is decoupling the managed or the management of these registries from the read-only, just providing a read-only? I mean, I'm just thinking whether or not CSD is solving a real problem that we have, or is it not? I just can't tell. I'm doing my best to follow the conversation and see whether or not it helps in any way, but maybe it doesn't.
I mean, I don't know, Derek. In a sense, if you're reading the data from Resource Mapper or reading it from CSD, I'm not sure what CSD adds. The point of CSD, my understanding was that it would not just act as a repository of facility data or a facade
Right.
to that.
It's the cross-referencing.
But it's the cross-referencing, yeah. That's the value out of CSD. If we're just talking about facilities and no cross-referencing, then it's not really.
I don't think it helps.
Value.
No, it's actually in the way.
Right. When things get complicated, we just add another piece.
Yeah. Well, unless it's providing a useful role as a way to federate, but I think that's what we're trying to avoid is this federation, right? We're trying to say that there is going to be one and only one source of truth for this, and then once we've got that source of truth with all of the information that it's going to need, if all you need is facility information, then you're good. If you are trying to query it by anything but a facility data item, then CSD maybe does add value. But probably only then.
Well, I mean, the other value it adds, I guess, is it provides an XML format for the facility data, which I guess we're also missing currently, and that's probably also where Carl is thinking.
Yeah, I mean the XML is nicer from the server side.
Yeah, I agree.
But I mean, I just want to get to a point where we can get Iris facility synchronized with something. I don't care what it is. I don't care how it's done. But it just, some decision needs to be made. It's not my decision to make. I'm just not sure who. I would assume that from within this community, there's somebody in there that should be making this decision.
So maybe we just need to implement CSD and well, we have to sit with Bob and just get synchronization between DHIS and the facility registry done. I think those are the two sides of it. I mean, if you had a CSD endpoint from the facility registry, that's all you need to listen to the data, right?
Yeah, I think that at the first set, that would be fine, and then at some point we need. Go ahead.
The first step is to get the data in there.
I think they are parallel efforts, and I mean, what is the facility registry facing consumers through a CSD endpoint, and the other one is how we get the data from the HIS to the facility registry. I mean, in the DL case, that should happen through the Fred API, but we know that the process may be a bit slow, so that's why we in general propose quick implementations from the native API in the hope that they eventually make it to the Fred standard.
I'm not really sure we can talk about a Fred standard. But
Okay,
anyway,
Fred API. Fred spec, I don't know.
Fred something.
I just see that there are two different problems. One is how consumers will actually query data from the facility registry. The other one is how we get data into the facility registry. They are different problems. Both need to be solved in order for the effort in general to succeed. But I mean, they are. We can decouple those issues, I think.
And I think from our perspective, I've heard two different answers on this call: is whether the facility registry is going to encompass the administrative facilities or not. If it doesn't, if resource map and DHIS are solely going to be focused on facilities that provide clinical services and the non-administrative ones, then that's not going to be enough from what we need from the Irish perspective. And so, Eric, getting back to your question, does CSD help? In that case, I think it would, because I think what would end up happening is that we have a federation of facility registry, one for the clinical facilities, and one for the administrative ones. And CSD would be what brings those together.
Sure.
I mean, I'm not sure that. So, from my perspective, it seems if we're going to be putting in CSD to be the provider registry, that having IRIS would really only need to understand the CSD side of things. It doesn't really need to understand the Thread API. That it doesn't add any particular value to it. You're neither the resource map nor DHIS are particularly interested in having the information about administrative facilities.
Well, I think before we make that conclusion, I think it would be helpful to have that conversation with Randy, just to see, is that a distinction that they've already decided, or how best to handle those types of facilities. And I think that's where, Bob, you were alluding to a kind of coordination call between us with Randy, and I think that would be a good subject of or topic to discuss there. So.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to make a conclusion. I was just saying if it was a if-then statement.
Okay.
No, but I mean, it's an interesting point, Carl. I mean, and I've kind of always maintained that different systems are going to maintain lists of facilities for different purposes, and not necessarily facility lists of locations. I mean, if you've got information about personnel, and personnel are employed at various places which are not just service delivery points. What's going to be in a health facility registry will always be a subset of your set. I guess internally, what that would still mean, I guess, is that you have to update your health facility identifiers from the health facility registry, but you're going to have additional points in there as well. I imagine systems that manage public works would be in a similar position. I mean, the folk who are responsible for paying the electricity bills for all the government buildings, all right? They will also have a list, which will also include the facility list as a subset of a larger list.
Right. So I think we need to, with Randy and Richard probably as well, have that call and get to a consensus. I think that's, for me, that's one of the roadblocks, but as to what's being managed where. I also, Ryan asked me to make sure that we talked about his architecture diagram. I know we're running out of time on this call, so I hope maybe we can jump to that at some point if we've got a few minutes.
Yeah, I looked at the architecture diagram and it was all pretty scary. So I didn't look at it again.
Okay, so the link is there, and I think what's really relevant here is whether the interoperability layer is going to set up a set of adapters for the facility registry, so that the facility registry, it doesn't have to worry about being CSD compliant. You guys can expose what you want with the Thread API, and then the interoperability layer will turn that into CSD. Let it do its translation thing. Or do you guys want to expose CSD compliant data directly or not? I think that's the takeaway from these two diagrams.
I think it's easier to just implement that adapter in the same box. I mean, I don't see a value in, at least for us, I think, to a separate service taking care of, adapting this. I mean, it's. I mean, see, the XML endpoint was something that we weren't exposing anyway, and we did a doc for this CSD spec. So it's actually the same for us. There's no backwards compatibility we have to honor, or we are afraid of breaking. So it's.
But Carl, the reason why the facility information in Iris may not be 100% up to date is not to do with whether Resource Mapper has a CSD endpoint or not. It's more to do with the fact that you don't know where to get the data from.
Right.
I mean, whether you could get it as JSON, CSV, what have you. If you could get that, you would be up to date. Now, admittedly, you'd be happier if you had that as CSD, but that's kind of a bit of a distraction.
Somebody's creating an echo here, and it's like a dream sequence for me now when I listen to Bob talk.
I think it might have been me. Sorry, I had my.
No.
I'm creating an echo of myself.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, technically it doesn't matter how we get that data. But there's two issues, I think. One is the scope of the data that is going to be managed in the facility registry is it going to be the subset, if it's just the service facilities, or is it going to be the full set? That's one question. The other issue is that I honestly don't want to spend a lot of time, doing it one way for one system, another way for another system. This is all supposed to be replicable. So if the easiest way to get things done and have them replicable is to have something like CSD or a well-defined Fred XML endpoint, then that's happy. So in terms of just the sustainability and the long-term maintenance, I would much rather have something that is referenced to the standard CSD to consume the information from the Iris side.
You can get the DHIS XML and translate it to CSD. I'll provide you with a transform for it. But that doesn't solve your problem entirely, because you're still. I mean, the earlier question you asked, would you get to a situation in Iris where you won't be managing your locations at all? It doesn't look like you'll get to that while you're going to be having these other employment locations which are not health facilities.
Right, but I mean, we could certainly shut down, limit the access to what gets added and how it gets added, so that we minimize the, we say no. So if we do have a good source of data, then we can just pull from that, and there won't be the need to add new facilities that are the service delivery ones. But yeah, just as a technical note, I think there is an issue with just doing an XSL transform, because at least in with XSLT proc, because of the OIDs, they're too large. Integers are too large. I got overflow errors trying to convert a UUID to a decimal representation in hexadecimal. But that's a minor technical issue.
You can ignore the UUIDs and just store the codes. UUIDs are a silly mathematical construction anyway. They don't actually mean anything. You can make up your own ones.
No, but CSD requires OID. So if you're talking about making a transform,
as long as the codes match, Carl, that's what's important. In Rwanda, what we try to achieve is the FOSA IDs match across all systems. If people want to invent their own 32-digit numbers, they can do that. I'm moving those. I go through a bizarre process at the moment. When I'm looking at trying to populate Resource Mapper with a facility, I first of all remove all the UUIDs from DHIS, and then I check any facility which doesn't have a UUID. I presume is new in Resource Mapper. So I update Resource Mapper, get the UUID which Resource Mapper generates, and populate that back into DHIS. So I have the one that's minted from there. But in fact, it's just a redundant movement of information. If I didn't do that, it wouldn't make any difference. If I've just made up a UUID, it wouldn't matter. Anyway, that's another discussion.
As long as you made up one that was globally unique in time and space.
I always make up ones like those, Derek. But you know, when I was 14, I learned pi to 20 decimal places, and ever since then I've never been able to remember anything. I can't remember telephone numbers, car registration numbers, but I still know pi to 20 decimal places, which is a useful random seed when I'm thinking up random numbers.
What an irrational thing for a kid to have done.
Totally mad, I know. I can't get it out of my head. But I think the UUID discussion is for another day.
Yeah, no.
What were you saying, the XSLT proc? That's
So if you have an incoming hexadecimal representation of a UUID, to convert it to an OID, you have to do the decimal representation, and you're going to exceed hit size. I think it's what if it's 8 bit or something? So it'll overflow.
Yeah, maybe.
I tried it.
I'm sure you're right. Yeah. Guys, it's kind of time. What I will say that I've undertaken to do, I'm going to undertake again to do, is I will populate Resource Mapper with what's currently in HMIS. But I can't currently populate the Resource Mapper instance that you guys have put together because the metadata doesn't match. Maybe let's get to that point and reassess where we are from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that sounds like a nice initial step, and then we can go from there. A few other follow-up things that I kind of picked up on from this call is I think it would be helpful for us to have a coordination, Google Hangout or something with Randy, just to make sure that we're all on the same page, and we can talk about, Carl, the one issue you brought up about service and other employment locations that you guys have in Iris and how that'll be handled. So I'm happy to help arrange that too.
That'd be great. Thanks, Scott.
Did anybody else have any other follow-up points from this call or things that we'll have on the agenda for next time?
Yeah, I think on our side we should start implementing CSD. I think that will be useful at some moment, at least when the data is ready.
Right. And I just posted a link. This is on the OpenHIE website. It's under the standards category. It's just where I was asked to collect all the CSD related stuff that we're doing.
Okay.
And there might be something interesting there, a PowerPoint presentation just to kind of step you through what the actors are and what you'd actually need to do and point you to the document itself as to what you need to be CSD compliant.
Okay, perfect.
All right, sounds great. Well, if there's anything else, why don't we wrap up for today? And yeah, thanks everybody for joining. And I think we have some clear next steps to help resolve all these issues and everything. So
Cool. Thanks.
all right, thanks everybody.
Bye, everybody.